Hi, I'm Melissa Taff from 911professor.com, and I'm here today to answer one of the most commonly asked questions on our website. What is the CritiCall test? So you may have heard of the CritiCall test because a potential employer in an emergency agency has contacted you and said, "We've seen your resume, you're a great candidate, please come in for our testing. You'll be doing the CritiCall test." And you might be wondering, what is this? There is very little information available online about it. Employers tend to disclose very little information about it to their candidates, and so it's very daunting and very confusing. But I'm here to give you today a quick overview about what the CritiCall test is and my 5 tips on how to pass. So let's get started. So let's start with an overview of the CritiCall test. So the CritiCall test is a multitasking test that is meant to assess a variety of skill sets related to emergency dispatch. And how they do that is by running a candidate on a computer system with a headset and a mic through a variety of testing over a period of time of somewhere between 45 minutes to 2.5 hours. Why is there such a time difference? Why is it so hard for people to explain what the CritiCall test is? It's because it's different everywhere. And I'll tell you why. The company that makes the CritiCall test makes a series of modules that test a variety of skill sets. And there are up to, I believe, 14 of those skill sets that they test. So each agency, when they buy the CritiCall test or choose to modify the CritiCall test, they select which one of those modules they want to include and which they want to leave behind. They select how heavily they want to weight different areas of the modules throughout the test. And so in that sense, all of these different agencies end up with slightly different CritiCall tests. Now, there are certain parts of the CritiCall test that almost all 911 agencies use. For example, the short-term memory, the numeric recall. There's a few others like that, and we're going to talk about those later in this video. But what you need to know is that every CritiCall test might be a little bit different. And in addition to being able to customize which areas they want to test, agencies also have the opportunity to add in their own testing material and embed it within the CritiCall test. And this means that there could be very, very unique differentiations on the CritiCall test across the board. So for example, police agencies I've seen use multiple choice questions at the end of the CritiCall test to assess candidates' knowledge of law or local statutes or bylaws, and they'll embed those right in. I've seen ambulance and emergency medical service agencies use medical terminology questions or symptomology and injury awareness questions. So I've seen those added in. I've seen fire departments add in their own custom mapping, and they can actually have candidates label the streets and major points of interest in their actual area. So in addition to being able to select which modules they test on, they can also add in any infinite number of questions on whatever topics they want to the end of the test. So it is very hard to pin down exactly what a CritiCall test is. And it also creates some differences of opinion when people talk about what a CritiCall test is, because they may have experienced different versions of a CritiCall test. So now you understand why it's so hard to find information that is consistent about the CritiCall exam on the internet. Now, the next thing you need to know about the CritiCall test is sort of an overview of what types of questions there are. So you're going to be sitting at a computer. You are going to have a headset on with a mic, and that is because depending on which, again, modules the agency is choosing to use to assess their candidates, you may be required to hear certain parts of the test and you may be required to speak certain parts of the test. In any CritiCall test, you will definitely be required to type answers from the test. So those are sort of how this test is set up. You'll come into a room, likely with other candidates, but it depends on the agency, and a proctor will sit down. You will start your CritiCall test, and once it starts, it's self-running. So you will sit at the computer and complete the entire test in its entirety on your own, just you and the machine going. It is timed, so it is not one of those things where you can take your time, and it is monitored by the proctor to make sure that everything is running properly, but they don't generally interfere in the testing once it's begun. So now I'm going to give you a couple of tips on how you can pass this test. Tip number 1, learn how to type. Some agencies will give you a separate typing test in addition to your CritiCall test. It's very common. And the typing speeds that they look for with accuracy is somewhere around 40 words per minute. That can be as low as 35 I've seen and as high as 50, but it's going to be around 40 to 45 words per minute that you're required to type. Now the CritiCall test doesn't have an individualized typing test where they would give you like a standard document to read or listen to and type up the answers, but they will require you to type out answers at a quick speed. So I highly recommend that you practice your typing speeds and that you work on proper fingers on a keyboard. You can use, there are a lot of different typing tests, typing software, and typing skill building exercises that you can find online for free. Don't pay for it. 911professor.com has one of those free typing tests and a little tip sheet as well about typing. If you want to access that, it's all for free. So please learn how to type, or at least be comfortable enough typing that you can type around 40 to 45 words per minute. Tip number 2, familiarize yourself with the question types. Now, how are you going to go about figuring out what these 14 skill sets that are being assessed are? There is a variety of scattered information on the internet that is not very reliable. There are a few test prep sites that cover off this kind of material, although I'm not sure where their source is from. But what I can tell you is that 911professor.com has affiliated itself with iprep.com, and iprep.com offers a complete CritiCall package. And part of that package is that they include an overview of every single type of those standard CritiCall questions and tips on how to ace the test. So they do describe every single type and give you examples. And I think that there is nothing more valuable in preparing for this test than knowing exactly what is going to be on it. So I really recommend iprep.com for preparation and understanding what exactly these questions are going to look like and what these 14 skill sets are that are being assessed. And that leads me to tip number 3. Do a practice test. Now, where are you going to find a practice test? There are very few of them available online. And again, I'd like to emphasize that they are questionably sourced. So please look at the sources of your tests or information or anything that you're using to practice for the CritiCall test, because you want to make sure that you are using credible information. You also need to understand that you're going to have to put some time and possibly a bit of money into this. And I can't stress that enough, that you will get everything back that you put into preparing for this test in multiple ways when you get the career. It is a great job. 911 dispatch is a fabulous career. And now that you have this opportunity to go do this testing, you really need to make sure that you put your all into it and that you don't waste this chance. So I recommend doing practice tests, at least one, but ideally several. And where are you going to find these? Well, 911professor.com offers one practice test for free on our website. I am not a very good businesswoman and I'm not looking to make a lot of money, so there is a full free test sitting there. If you'd like to go check it out, try it out, please do. We also offer other tests. Once you've used that test number 1 practice test, what a lot of candidates will do is once they feel prepared and like they know what's going on, they'll move on and use some of the other tests after that. These are no-frills tests. They don't come with a lot of tips or explanations. We have, as I said, affiliated ourselves with iPrep, and iPrep offers, again, a full suite. So in addition to explanations to all of their questions, they do also offer tips, recommendations, and they offer 4 full simulated tests, all included in the one price of their course, their CritiCall Prep course. So we do recommend iPrep's material, but we also have stuff on 911professor.com. You can pick and choose or do both. It's up to you. Tip number 4. After you've done a practice test, you're going to realize that you have deficits and strengths. So your strengths are already there. That's great. Now you know what types of questions are on the test and what you're good at. And now you're going to take the things that you found challenging and start to practice those skills. So you're going to either use other practice tests to practice those skills, or you might want to break those skills down that you find most challenging and create ways to practice them on your own. So you could have a friend or family member say various series of numbers to you and then have you practice typing them afterwards. You may want to practice reading an article and then answer questions about it afterwards. There are different ways to practice each of these different sections, but once you've finished doing a practice test and you can identify where your challenges are and what you need to hone before you go into that real test, that's the next tip. And I also think that what is a kind of an ideal way to go at this challenge is to do a practice test, then hone your skills that you need to work on, and then do another practice test to see if you've effectively increased those skill sets. And that's what I would do. And finally, tip number 5, arrive prepared for your CritiCall test. I know this probably sounds like something you've heard before, but you really, really need to have a good sleep before you go there. You need to have eaten a reasonable meal so that you don't feel sluggish, but that you also have enough energy to get you through what could possibly take 2.5 or more hours. Now, you also want to moderate your caffeine and any medication that you might take in the morning. So I would avoid taking anything in the morning that isn't necessary that might make you sleepy. So if it's not necessary that you take, for example, a lot of allergy medicine, maybe you could reduce your dose a little bit. You obviously don't want it interfering in your performance with a runny nose or itchy eyes, but you also don't want to feel sluggish if that's something that slows you down in the morning. Likewise, caffeine is a huge one. So a little bit of caffeine is a great thing. It's going to keep you on your toes, but you do need to remember that you are going to be nervous, and those nerves are going to cause a lot of adrenaline to surge in your body, and that you will already be shaking and more than alert enough. So I would really recommend moderating your caffeine before going into the CritiCall test. Also, I shouldn't have to say this, but in case I do, don't bring a coffee or a drink or anything like that into the test with you. It's considered unprofessional usually, and usually not allowed because you are on a keyboard and around computer equipment. It's okay to have a bottle of water in your bag, and if a proctor says that you are allowed to have sips of it at various points, that's fine. But generally speaking, don't bring food or drinks into a CritiCall exam. And that's it. I wish you luck on this challenge, and I really can't stress enough, 911 dispatch is a fantastic career. It is so great, and you have an opportunity. If you've been invited to do a CritiCall test, this might be your one shot. So please, please put everything you have into this. Changing careers is something that is difficult, but very rewarding, and a 911 dispatch career or 911 communications career is just, it's so wonderful. It's so challenging. It's difficult. It's exciting, but it's also safe because you're in a climate controlled environment. So I really, really recommend giving this your all, doing everything you can to prepare for this career, because this might be your career for the next 30 years of your life. And don't let that get washed aside because you didn't take the time to prepare. So please, please, please take the time, due diligence, please prepare for this test because it could change your life in such a great 911 communicating way. Thank you, and I hope to see you at 911professor.com.